Hi everybody, it's Julie. Welcome to Hello Monday. Today I'm going to be sharing a variation of a technique called the faux ceramic tile. This is just something I was playing around with in my studio and I really love the end result, so I thought I would share. I'm going to be using some very coarse grind clear embossing powder as well as some tinted transparent blue embossing powder by Wow. And I'm also going to use the Thankful stamp set from the Essentials by Ellen Line and Twinchies. These are 2-inch square mat board pieces by Inchy Arts, and you get a lot of them in the box, and I love them because they can hold up to the intense heat and embossing powder we're going to be applying to them, and it's so much faster to use these than to try to make something similar on my own. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull the stamps I want to work with out and layer them onto the mat board, kind of determining the positioning and placement. And I realized as I was going, I was like, hey, I could mount all these at the same time. Save me some save me a few extra seconds there. So I just grabbed a bigger block and we're going to mount those all at the same time. And then I'm going to grab Ranger's Archival Jet Black ink and ink up and go ahead and get those stamped. And I am going to let that ink kind of soak down. So I kind of sit there for a minute on the mat board and let it soak in. And then I'm also going to make sure that the ink is dry by grabbing my heat gun. And I just want to make sure I have no moisture left from the ink here because of the next step. So I'm going to use some adhesive here on a scrap strip of cardstock from my bin. This is just going to act as a handle to hang on to that square so I don't have to grab it with my hands. And then I can take my Versamark pad and I'm going to tap that across the surface, make sure I've got a nice coating of Versamark on top, and that's why that archival ink needed to be completely dry. And then I'm going to dump some clear, coarse grind embossing powder over the top and start to heat it. So as you can see here, I have my powder ready and available because I'm just actually going to heat this up and let it melt. It's going to be kind of lumpy bumpy, but I want to apply a second coat. So while it is still hot, I can very quickly lay down my heat gun, shut it off, of course, first, and then go back over that bowl and pour more of that chunky clear powder over the top, and it will stick because that powder was still hot there on the mat board, and then continue to heat it. And then it's going to start to create a really high loft glassy finish that resembles ceramic tile. The next step is to grab some of that Beautiful powder, and I'm just going to have that at the ready, and I'm going to reheat until this is molten. You do not want to get so close that you start making that clear powder bubble on the surface, so you just want to get it heated enough that it is kind of liquid and molten again. And then while it's still hot, I'm going to intermittently sprinkle some of the Beautiful transparent powder by Wow and get that on there. And it doesn't look too good right now, but as you melt it again and it starts to combine with the clear powder on the surface there, it starts to kind of spread out and creates a really neat, almost mottled look. And then I'm going to add just a little bit more. I wanted to have just a little bit more tint to it, but it doesn't look great at first when you put it over the top there. You do have to heat it, continue heating it so that it will melt and combine with the clear. And then it really does resemble almost a marbled tile look. Very cool looking. So at this point then, I actually decided to grab some pinches of the clear coarse grind powder and sprinkle those in where I had any low spots, and it kind of created a really cool even more marbled mottled effect that I just really love, and hopefully you'll see it much better in the detail shots later on. But here you can see what it looks like when it's pretty much finished. Now to edge the whole thing, I'm going to use my Versamark pad and tap that along the 3 edges that I can actually reach, and I had to wait until it was cool first. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some gold coarse grind. This is the Ultra High Loft powder by Wow, and then I decided to just pour it into my coffee filter here and just tap it in there. I always use a clean coffee filter for each different color of embossing powder I'm working with, so I don't end up cross-contaminating anything. So there I've got just the edges, all just barely kissed with that embossing powder along the edges, and then I'm going to grab my heat tool again, and I'm going to barely run it along the edge there just to melt that gold embossing powder. I don't want to reactivate the ultra thick clear on the top. I just want to get these edges melted, and I may have to flip it over to the back side because chances are there are some loose flakes of gold embossing powder on the back that didn't get melted. So I'm just going to very quickly touch those until they melt and then back off. Now the last side, I waited until this was cool, and then I got a hold of it and reoriented it there on my little temporary handle so I'd have a way to hang on to it. And then I'm going to ink up again with Versamark, but remember, you do have to wait until it's completely cool. You can't touch it until it's cooled off. And then dip it in the gold embossing powder to get that fourth side. And again, I'm just going to come back in with my heat gun and barely heat along that edge to get everything finished. Now, when I got to this point, I noticed that a couple of stray flecks of that coarse gold powder got into, it kind of blew off into the clear embossing enamel and melted, and it kind of looked like confetti, and I thought it was such a cool look that I decided to go ahead and grab a couple more pinches of it and sprinkle it in there. And while the embossing powder was still molten, it just kind of melted into the powder there and created a really neat effect that looks like it's confetti embedded into that clear embossing enamel. So I just love the effect, and hopefully here as I'm tilting it in the light you can see the way that kind of sparkles and shimmers and adds an extra dimension to that finished tile piece. I just love that effect. It's so cool. And then just to finish off the card, I made a standard A2 card. I had a scrap of this black patterned paper in my scrap bin, so I just kind of fishtailed the end of it and took some tape runner to put on the back side there so I can mount that to my card front. This is not going to be a very fancy layout. I really like the focus to be on that particular design element, the tile there that I've created, so I just don't want to gussy it up too much anywhere else and just let that ceramic tile take center stage. So once I've got that in place, I did have a sentiment I wanted to use. This is from the Amazing Women stamp set, and it says, "You are beautiful inside and out," which I thought was perfect for this card design. So I'm just going to go ahead and ink up with Archival Jet Black. And even though I have that pattern paper there, normally I would have left the pattern paper off, but because of the way the tile was going to be laid out on the card, I needed to have something kind of balancing over there on the right hand side. So this kind of gave me an overall balance on my layout. So now just to finish it off, I'm going to take some Pretty Pink Posh gold sequins. These are the 4mm size, and I'm just going to swipe those through a little puddle of multi-medium that I've squirted there onto a little post-it note. And I'll just swipe those, grab them with my tweezers and swipe them through and get those mounted in place. It does take me a long time to determine where I'm going to put my sequins, so I kind of get them all in place and then start gluing them down. So there you can see the finished look. I just love the effect, and it's such an easy one to get. It always impresses people when they discover it's really not a ceramic tile. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. All the supplies are available at ellenhutson.com, and we have more still shots and details available at the Classroom blog. Thanks for watching.